Welcome to The Interview with Leslie Heaney, a podcast that features informational and inspirational stories from experts in everything from fashion and the arts to medicine and science. The Interview covers any and all topics that are timely and relevant to our lives today. I'm host Leslie Heaney, and I'm excited to share these compelling stories with you. I promise you'll be inspired, learn something new, and hopefully share a few laughs along the way. Today, I'm beyond excited to be talking with New York legend, Jamie Niven. Jamie is the former chairman of Sotheby's and an auctioneer extraordinaire. He's lent his auctioneering skills to over 750 charities around the world, raising over $800 million for various causes over the years. Before Sotheby's, Jamie had a very successful career in investment banking and private equity, while still dedicating his time and talent to various philanthropic causes, including serving on the board of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and the Museum of Modern Art for decades. Today, Jamie is currently lending his talents and passion to the Bloomberg Philanthropies Board and to the Partnership to End Addiction, serving as its chairman. In today's episode, Jamie talks about his exciting career in life, including what it was like to be the son of Hollywood legend David Niven. Jamie is brilliant, a terrific storyteller, and absolutely hilarious. So without further ado, Jamie Niven. Jamie.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so happy to see you. You flew in last night?
I did.
You were in Paris?
I was in Paris. I flew all the way for this.
Oh my gosh. I love you for doing that. I'm so happy you're here. What were you doing over there?
I just went over after Christmas and spent a week.
Good. Are you back now?
I'm back here for a while. I'm going to Mississippi in a couple of weeks to meet with some of the local state senators about the money they're receiving from the government for the opioid fines and how they're going to spend the money.
Wow.
There's about $50 billion that's coming out. It's going to go to various locations around the country, and they're going to figure out what to do with that money to help with the addiction problems.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, this is all the fines that have been levied against the people that were involved in producing opioids. And that money has now been allocated out to various states, and then the states in turns will allocate it to the various communities where they are trying very hard to figure out ways to get the message to families that there's a solution to all this, and that here's who you can contact, this is what you can do to help your family. And it's all about the government trying to help families deal with the opioid crisis. That
is incredible. Now, how are they determining which states are getting the funding?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's just started now.
Okay, because we live in Millbrook, and it's by all sort of appearances, it's a sleepy town. My husband was for many years a volunteer firefighter there, and one of the biggest issues that they had, most frequent calls, was for ODs. And so having Narcan kits was I don't know if that's part of it, if it's more treatment,
well,
or they're doing like prevention.
They should have them, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Millbrook was the bedrock of LSD, because that was the days that Timothy Leary spent some time there with the Hitchcock place.
Yeah. Which is still there. And the guy that's there, it's kind of like Willy Wonka. He doesn't leave the premises too often.
It's large.
It's huge.
Yeah, big gate, I remember.
Big gate. And there's a guy in town, God bless him, who, the rumor is he was part of that group, and he never really kind of recovered.
Hitch is a great friend of mine. He lives in Houston.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Billy.
All right, that's so interesting. I want to get more. Okay. I want to hear more about your.
You have that in your notes.
I do. Jamie's seen my notes for all our listeners beforehand, just so I didn't touch any topics that he didn't
feel comfortable dealing
want to cover. Right. Although you did tell me that nothing is off limits, which probably has your children that are listening.
My children are both very frightened when I say things like that, but I'm not kidding.
I know you're not.
I'm 78. What am I going to change now?
Listen, I'm with you. I'm 50, and I feel like I'm letting it all hang out.
Yeah, of
course. We're when you're on the back nine, you've got to.
You're just starting the back nine. I've played about 7 holes. So I got 2 to go. Hopefully, get to a tie and have to play some extra holes.
I mean, are you kidding? All right. So for people that are listening, and just to sort of get kind of the origin of Jamie Niven. And may not know who your dad, David Niven, was, or don't really understand what a big, huge star he was.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about him.
Okay, so my father was he was raised in England. He was British. His father was killed in World War I, so his father was killed very early on, like 1914. So he grew up essentially without a father. Okay. And he was able to get himself into the military academy, which is called Sandhurst, which is what you have here is called West Point. And after he finished his studies there, he was commissioned to the Isle of Malta, where he spent 4 years as a British Army officer. England had a division there, and that's where a lot of the ships in the Mediterranean were kept. He decided that he hated being in the Army, and he left. He resigned his commission, got on a boat, and came to America.
Did he ever tell you what was why America, why he did?
He told me that he hated being in the Army because it was so boring.
Okay.
And that he just felt that it didn't sit well with him. And why he came to America was because he thought that he could come to America like a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Now I talk about 1934. The Depression was over, and it was the land of opportunity. And so he arrived, and he was picked up by a friend of a friend of a friend off the boat.
As they did back then, yeah.
Yeah, and they went to lunch at 21 because the man was called Jack Hemingway. He was from St. Louis. And he took him to lunch at 21, where he went all the time. And the owner of 21 came over and said, "Who you got here, Jack? Who's this good-looking guy? Who is this guy here, Jack?" "This is David Niven." "David Niven, what do you do?" "I don't do anything." "Why not?" "Well, I just resigned my commission from the British Army." "Do you know about wine?" "I know how to drink it." "Good, you're hired." And he hired him as a salesman for 21 Brands, which was a shop next to 21, which today is the Museum of Broadcasting.
Oh, stop it, yeah.
But it was a place you bought smoked salmon and ham and wine and champagne, and my father worked there, and he worked as a sommelier at night. They needed him at 21, which in those days was the number one restaurant in the world, right? And I guess in the process of working there, he met several people, and one of them was a woman called Loretta Young, who was a big star in those days, and she said, "You must come and visit me in California." Like a lot of people say, "Oh, next time you're in town, call me." Well, he took her seriously, and he ended up getting to California. Needless to say, no Loretta Young on the end of the phone. And so he got a job as a deckhand on a small boat that you would charter out of San Pedro and go fishing off Catalina Island, and that's what he did. And one day, one of the biggest stars in the world was called Merle Oberon, chartered the boat. And he was sort of baiting her hook and all this stuff that you do as a deckhand, and she rather liked him. So they started seeing each other.
By the way, I Googled her.
Yeah, she's
Merle
big.
She's
big.
Big, and also, I mean...
Beautiful.
Yeah, which means he knew how to reel in, more than just the fish that were, he had some other skill sets, obviously.
But she really liked him, and they started seeing each other. And she was under contract to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, actually, to Sam Goldwyn Studios, and she called up Sam and said, "I've got this good-looking boyfriend, see if you can use him." So Sam, being a nice guy, hired my father to be an extra. An extra, for all you know, is when you see a crowd scene and no one's speaking, that's what an extra does. That's what an extra is. Anyway, he had good charm and he had good looks, and because of her, he got to know some of the big people there in Hollywood. And slowly but surely, he got more and more parts in movies and speaky parts. And then he became a friend of Errol Flynn, who was one of the biggest stars in the world. And they had a house they shared called Cirrhosis by the Sea. And
was it just the two of them, or was there other roommates?
I think there were roommates, but we don't go into that.
Yeah.
Anyway, my father ends up making a very big-time movie called Wuthering Heights, which starred Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon. And he played the part of the cuckold husband of Merle. And after that movie was out, Germany had invaded Poland and England declared war. And he went back to fight. And he was in the commando when he got back to England, and he stayed in the army and fought through France and made a couple of movies that were movies sort of to help raise money for the war effort. And he went back to California when the war was over at late 45 and picked up what was left of his career, which wasn't much. And he had a rough time. And my brother and I were born. Our mother sadly had died very early on. In my case, she died when I was 6 months old. And so he was sort of faced with a career that was nowhere. He married a insane Swedish woman, forgive me, all of you who are relatives of hers. And there we are. And he had a rough time. We lived in California.
Yeah.
I went to school out in California. And In 1958, my father won the Academy Award for Best Actor in a movie called Separate Tables. And that was a big deal. To win the Academy Award was a big deal, and he did.
So first of all, how admirable of him to re-enlist and go back to fight for his
Yeah, but you're a
country.
British Army officer.
Yeah.
You go back. There's no issue. A lot of people didn't, as I understand.
Yeah.
Not him. He went back.
That really says a lot, I think, about
Well, anyway, so he won
yeah.
the Academy Award, and he then really starred in a lot of big movies.
So what was the timing of that, though? So he came back in 1945.
46, right at the end of 45.
Okay, and Separate Tables was 1958.
Right, so he made a bunch of movies in that period of time. Made quite a few, actually, but none particularly good.
Okay.
I would say, except for the first one he made, which was called A Matter of Life and Death, which was a very good movie in 1945, 46. But he had a rough time. And in 1955, Michael Todd was a very famous movie producer, had the rights to Around the World in 80 Days, which was a Jules Verne story. And he got my father to play the lead role in that, called Phineas Fogg. And it's about the story of a man that goes around the world in 80 days. And it was a huge success, this movie. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture. So he was on a roll.
Yep.
And starred in a bunch of movies and then made Separate Tables, which was a Terence Rattigan play, made into a movie, black and white movie, and he won the Academy Award for that. And he went on to make a lot of big-time movies after that. In 1960, he decided to leave California and go and live in Europe.
What was the reasoning for that?
I think it's pretty simple. He was British, and I think he honestly thought two things. One, taxes, no question about it. He was paying no taxes in Switzerland, 90% tax in America at that point. And
is that right?
Yeah, because until John Kennedy became president, tax rate in America was very, very high at the high end. So you got to 90 fairly quickly.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And two, that he found himself getting job offers to make movies in Europe. And he wanted to go and live in Europe for the rest of his life. And so he bought a house in Switzerland, and he also bought a house in the south of France in 1960. And I moved with him, obviously, because he was my only parent. So we lived in Switzerland. And
you had been at St. Paul's before
I went to St. Paul's
and,
School for Boys, which was really horrible because I came from California and spoke, bitchin', it's good to see you, sheer. And all these people at St. Paul's, Jesus, what's it like living in California? It must be marvelous. And I really didn't like it much. And we didn't get a lot of ice time in Pacific Palisades, California.
Yeah.
And St. Paul's School was the cradle of American hockey.
It's also like a journey to the North Pole. I mean,
it was cold.
It's chilly up there.
It was cold, and I had better weather.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, so I convinced him that I should go to school in Switzerland, which I did. I went to school in Lausanne, which is a lovely town on Lake Geneva, and my father's house wasn't that far from there, like an hour and a half by train. Anyway, my father went on to make a lot of movies, and he was, I don't know, he was one of these characters. They would bring him on board to be an MC at the Academy Awards, and
well, he was the host that year with the famous streaker,
yeah,
right?
He was streaked. He was introducing Elizabeth Taylor, who was going to give a Best Picture away. The streaker came out when he was about to introduce her. And
now, was that a thing then? That was like streaking, like hair was out? And
I had a friend of mine who streaked El Morocco. I remember at the nightclub one night. And people streaked airplanes. Oh, yeah. And the other thing they streaked was football fields. And so you saw streaking going on at Michigan State, games and all that. It was big.
I mean, streaking should be, brought back.
I thought it was a very good idea.
Yeah.
Although the guy that streaked El Morocco wasn't very pretty. Anyway, so they were very worried about a streaker getting in there. They had tremendous security that year. And the guy had hid backstage. And then when the moment came for my father to introduce Elizabeth, out this guy roared and snuck by him.
And nobody even saw this guy's starting to take his shirt off.
No, he came out stark naked, giving the V for victory sign. You can see it on YouTube. It's still.
I did watch it, and there was some amazing quip that he said about, I think, referring to his manhood.
Said, the only way this man is going to get a laugh is to strip off and show his shortcomings, and that was a pretty good put down. Anyway, so. Around that time, my father started to write some books, and he wrote a couple of very successful books. One was called The Moon's a Balloon, which was about himself, and the other was Bring on the Empty Horses, which was about Hollywood in the 30s and 40s. These were big bestsellers, number one on the bestseller list for a number of weeks. The second book, Bring on the Empty Horses, was on the bestseller list in America for 51 weeks.
Wow.
That's big. They sold millions of copies of these books. And he went on to write a few more. So that's the story of him.
And then he stayed in Switzerland and
France. But he worked in America and he worked elsewhere. He had the choice of going to where he wanted to. He basically made a movie a year. He did a lot of commercials. His books were tremendously successful. He went on speaking tours all over the place, talking about the books. Yeah, I would say that he sadly got Lou Gehrig's disease, and he died when he was 73, which is obviously young. And but he was the real deal. Yeah, for sure. I mean, what for you though? What was it? I mean, you talked about going to St. Paul's and sort of the culture, divide there. But he had no idea anything to do with education. Looking back on it now, you expect your parents to be brilliant at everything, but there was no way. He'd gone to military academy. He didn't have a clue what was. Anyway, his idea in life for me was that I would go to Trinity College, Cambridge, because my mother's family had all gone there. My mother came from a very long line of Scottish family, 24 generations, I think we are strong right now. So the idea that I would go to Trinity College, Cambridge, which had some good to it because I went to London and lived there when I was 16 alone in my apartment, and I went to school for an hour a day.
Wait, when was that? After St. Paul's, before?
After I left St. Paul's and went to school in Switzerland. Okay. And so after 3 years in Switzerland, I ended up in London, ostensibly to work on my...
But you finished your kind of their version of high school? You're like a Doogie Howser. You're really. 16 and you're... Okay.
Not really.
Okay.
It didn't work like that. We're talking about 1960. Yeah. So anyway, I ended up being in London, which was fabulous, and I loved every minute of it. Had my own apartment, had my car. It's the best. Yeah. And I behaved really badly. It was fantastic. And anyway, in the process of working towards taking my entrance exams to Cambridge, I had applied to, just because I was angry with my father at the time, I applied to UCLA because I wanted to go back and live in California because I really loved living in California. And I thought I'd get into UCLA. I wanted to go to the film school. I had all kinds of good ideas, right? Nope, turned down, which was disappointing.
Why?
Well, I was applying as a Swiss resident, and UCLA is a state school.
Oh, so and
they have very few people from foreigners they take in, as it was explained to me, and I just didn't get one of the 3 or 4 slots. I did, however, apply to this college called Harvard University, Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah,
no one's ever heard of it.
And I got a letter back from from Harvard College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I went for an interview in London. They always tried to interview the kids that were applying, and there were a lot of people applying for 4 places, 4 English students. And I went to the interview, and I thought, forget it, this is not happening. And I thought nothing more of it. Terribly disappointed I was turned down. But I noticed in the turned down letter from UCLA, it was a very thin envelope. And about a week later, I got this big, thick envelope from Harvard. And I thought, this is not possible. Yeah. And I opened it up, and sure enough, they'd taken me. So I ended up going to Harvard. And
amazing. And how was the news received?
Very badly.
Okay.
He didn't want to pay. He was furious about it. He thought I should go to Cambridge. But what he didn't know is I called the guy at Trinity College, Cambridge, the man that I had talked to, and said I had a dilemma. And he told me I didn't have a dilemma. I never told my father this, but I said, what do you mean? He said, if you're stupid enough to turn down Harvard while you haven't passed your entrance exams, you don't belong here.
Wow, that's great.
So I said, just out of curiosity, where did you go to college? He said, Trinity College, Cambridge. I said, great. Where did you do your graduate work? Harvard, Mr. Niven. I wish you well, he said, and he hung up. So I didn't have a place to go. So when I told my father that I'd accepted to Harvard, he didn't realize that's all I had. But anyway, I went there, and it was not well received. I'll put it that way.
So tell me, so you're in LA, and I'm sure there were a lot of other kids, or not, I don't know how many, but other kids at school who had parents that were in the business.
I went to Catholic school when I was in California, and none of the kids there had parents in the game.
Okay.
On the weekends, I would play with kids that had parents in the
Yeah.
game. So yeah, I grew up with a bunch of Hollywood kids, but during the week I was in Catholic school.
Yeah. And how was that, growing up with a father that was so famous? I mean, did you feel, you're being stopped at the airport, was it that kind of a thing, or was it not like that back then?
You didn't really see much of him. I mean, that's the thing that one has to remember here, that also the way people were brought up, if they had means in those days, they had nannies. And my stepmother, I never interfaced with at all, basically. And my father was busy working or whatever. Yeah. And so I didn't see much of him. So honestly, it wasn't such a big hardship to have him as a parent because I never saw him.
Yeah.
And we would sometimes go on family trips, and they were usually disastrous. And
that's for everybody, by the way.
All I'm telling you right now is I've heard from everybody. So not everybody, but people who were lucky enough to have been brought up in a certain milieu.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, so
that was not an uncommon.
Totally not.
Right. No matter what business that your parents were in.
No, but saying was it difficult having him as a father? No, would be my answer. I wish that I had been closer to him. I did become close to him later on in life, but I was very distant from him in all those years up until I was about 30.
Yeah, and having lost your mom at such a young age, that it cannot be an easy experience.
I don't think anyone has an easy experience when you lose a parent, but losing a mother is a whole lot harder than losing a father, I think.
Yeah.
I say that because that happened to me. But I mean, not having her around was tough.
Yeah.
I think looking back on my life, that was really a body blow.
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm afraid so. And it showed.
How your father, is known as a great storyteller.
Very good.
Great raconteur. I watched a bunch of his clips on Dick Cavett, which are hilarious, by the way. Do you know the story of he was banned from Columbia Pictures?
Yeah.
Because I guess the head, this guy named Cohen, he was out in the boat with Errol Flynn. Do you know this story?
Yeah, I do, yeah. But his interviews with Cavett were great. His interviews with Parkinson in England were great. And Parkinson was the great interviewer. David Frost and then Parkinson.
Oh, yeah.
He did a lot of Parkinson interviews. And he did a lot. I mean, he was on...
Is it you have a favorite story that he told you about, or...
My favorite story is the Academy Awards, where the streaker gets nailed by him.
Yeah.
I think that, to me, was the classic numero uno story of a lifetime. But he was a great raconteur. He wasn't a joke teller, but he was a wonderful storyteller.
Right.
And...
well, the story about Cohen, for those that are listening, I mean, he was, I think it was with Errol Flynn or Noel Coward, one or the other, on a boat coming back from Catalina Island.
It would have been Errol Flynn.
And they just see this boat is broken down.
Yeah.
And they go up, and it's Cohen, who's the head of Columbia Pictures.
He was, yes.
And
Harry Cohen.
And they helped tow him in and help me out. And, and your father was at MGM then, I think. And they get the boat in. And then the next day, your father sends him a letter saying, is he aware that in maritime law, they own part of the
boat.
Of the boat anyway, and I guess he was banned. And,
he was.
And he went in his office, right, and apologized. So this whole thing. I'm telling you a story, No, I thought it was hilarious, and I guess Cohen didn't think it was hilarious.
No.
But I,
took it very badly.
I love that. That's very Niven.
Very Niven.
Humor.
He had a very. I mean, if you read the books, you'll see the wit is prevalent throughout. I mean, I remember he had this beautiful house in the south of France, and people would stop in their boats opposite the house, and the house had its own port. So he liked me to row him out to lunch on the rowboat. I'm not kidding, a rowboat. And he'd get up, and one time we were getting on Sam Spiegel's boat, and Sam Spiegel was a huge movie producer, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, all that. And Sam Goldwyn, at a very old age, was on the boat, and my father gets on the boat. I'm following up behind him, and my father says, "Sam, you look great." And he said, "Always a pallbearer, never a corpse." and that began...
By the way, that's an amazing line.
That began that afternoon, where there was just a constant stream of funny stories and Hollywood stories. And
so tell me, though, do you have you also, as are your children, and your grandson, by the way, great storytellers, great senses of humor. I mean, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite story from your Hollywood days? Or
I don't really, I mean, there are so many stories that I don't really have one in particular. And you know, honestly, there was a constant flow of funny remarks about things.
Yeah.
My father could make a story out of buying oranges.
Yeah.
And you know, he had wonderful friends who were very talented, mostly in the theater business. You know, my father was never a theater actor. Noel Coward in particular was his best friend. And Noel would come and spend 3 weeks with us in the south of France. And that's a long time for anyone to come and spend in your house. And I had a job of taking Noel around if he wanted to go to the casino at night.
Say managing.
I was the manager, for about 3 weeks. And so my father every year invited Noel and his household to come and have Boxing Day lunch in Switzerland.
Yeah.
We happened to live in a little town called Châteaudet. And there was a train that went from Montreux up to Châteaudet and then Gstaad, which is much more famous than all the other things are. And Noel lived in a house, a little place called Les Avants. And he'd arrive every Boxing Day with a house full of people. And every Boxing Day, these 10 people, all in mink coats, men and women, in the back of the train, coming up to Châteaudet. And my father got the station master to put on his gold uniform and the hat and all the thing. And the band played Rule Britannia and They'll Always Be in England. And they would get off the back of the train and stagger up to where we were all waiting. And the Swiss people going skiing were looking at us with their goggles. And those trains weren't very glam. You stood up in those trains with skis, looking out at this procession of people in mink coats, the band and the buffet de la gare waiter with drinks. And my father would say, "Look at the view, Noel. I've seen the view. Don't you love the songs? I wrote the songs." And it was just like that. Sort of a lot of the time, of funny moments of life, and it's just that the people in the house weren't called Smith and Jones; they were called Olivier. And
was there any guest that he had or celebrity that you met that you were ever starstruck by, or
Greta Garbo for sure, because she used to swim naked in the pool in Pacific Palisades. I was pretty young then. Then we moved to Switzerland.
That's a shame. That didn't happen later.
There's a bit more to this, because later on in life, now we're in the south of France, and she was now living with a man in the south of France, and she'd come over a lot, because he was a really good friend of hers. And she'd swim naked in the pool. And then I was 15 and 16, and she once came up to me, and I was sitting with my feet in the pool. I was just looking at her, and she said,
"Backstroke, breaststroke?" She
was just swimming anywhere she wanted to. And she looked at me and said, "I promised your father I wouldn't do you, otherwise I would."
Oh, my God.
I said, that's really sad.
That is
bad
hilarious.
Luck.
I mean,
the one person that remained great friends with me is Robert Wagner. He's now 93 years old.
Wow.
And they made a movie together called The Pink Panther.
Yeah.
Which was shot in 1960. So RJ, as he's called, I talk to him all the time. And he's just the most wonderful man.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and he calls me Young, or Mr. Harvard Man, depending on the day.
Yeah. I mean, and he had such a tough time, too.
Oh, man.
Natalie Wood.
He's had such a rough time. Still has a rough time.
So you enroll at Harvard.
Right.
How was Harvard?
Loved it.
And then you decide not to follow in the family business.
I never, at that point, I never thought about it. And the company business that my father owned with 2 other actors called 4-Star Television was sold around that time. So no, when I got out of college, I went to work for Lehman Brothers. I had been offered a job at CBS to work on specials, which was a good thought.
Like is it in terms of production, or as a broadcaster? Production
side. CBS would have specials, whatever you want to call it. It might be an hour about a movie star. It might be an hour about a band. It might be that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was offered a job at Lehman Brothers because I got an interview there. And Lehman Brothers paid me $7,500, and Bill Paley offered me $5,000. He was the head of CBS.
Yeah.
So I took the one that paid me $7,500. I'd just gotten married. I had $0. And so I never did.
You made the Lehman choice. And tell me this. on the television special that you were on that I had watched, you were talking about how, I guess, Mr. Lehman invited you up for a meeting or for lunch and was encouraging you to get involved in something outside of working at Lehman.
What actually happened was Bobby Lehman was his name, and he was around when I was hired there. Bobby Lehman died in 1970, I think it was. I went to work there full-time in 1968. But he wasn't well towards the end of his life. And for those of you that live in New York, the Lehman wing at the Met was his.
Yeah.
Anyway, very soon after I joined the firm, I was sitting in my office and my phone rang. It never rang. And it was Mr. Lehman's assistant saying, Mr. Lehman would love you to come down and have a word. I didn't say, I'll come and see him tomorrow. Whatever I was doing, I dropped it, went down to see Mr. Lehman. Hello, Mr. Lehman, how are you? How are you? Jamie, sit down, please.
By the way, kids today, those millennials would be like, I've got to check my schedule.
Yeah.
You
don't check your schedule with Bobby Lehman.
No, you do not. Yeah.
Anyway, so I sat down and he said, and I'm so glad you're here. Of course, I met your father several times. What a lovely guy he was. And what are you doing in the not-for-profit world? Well, the not-for-profit world was my world because I didn't have any money. But I didn't pull that silly remark on him. And I said, well, to be honest with you, Mr. Lehman, I just got here, I just moved to New York, and I really hadn't thought of it. My father really wasn't that generous about giving money away, maybe for the Screen Actors Guild or maybe for the home or something like that. But he wasn't writing any checks for cancer, let's put it that way. Anyway, I said, Mr. Lehman, I don't really have any money. He said, that doesn't matter. What you have to do is you have to find something first rate, stick with it, learn all about it, so that as time goes on, you'll be able to talk about it in a meaningful way. And when you ask people for money, they'll realize you're serious about it, and you'll know what you're talking about. And if you're lucky enough to make money, well, then you'll support this institution that you have decided is in something that you want to get involved with. So I went back to
By the way, what a great mentor. I mean,
that was great advice.
Great lesson. Yeah.
Honestly, he did that, I think, to all the people that came to work. Anyway, so I went back to my office. I was sharing with the guy. I said, what did you do? And Mr. Lehman suggested that. He said, I got involved with the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And I said, what the fuck is that? And he said, well, we have a meeting once a month, and researchers come and talk to us, and docs come and talk to us, and nursing staff comes and talks, and we learn all about the hospital, all the research that's going on in cancer. Sounds like a great idea, I said. I joined it. I didn't realize how important Memorial Sloan Kettering was and is today. Anyway, in the process of that, I joined.
Sloan Kettering back then probably was also
big. Huge.
Yeah.
But big relative to what today? No. I mean, it's enormous today. But anyway, I don't know. I got involved with, it was called the Junior Committee. And in 1978, I got a call from Lawrence Rockefeller. Lawrence Rockefeller was the key man at Memorial Sloan Kettering. His family had given the land. He was one of the 5 brothers. He was the most remarkable human being, a really extraordinary man. Anyway, my assistant came in and said, Mr. Lawrence Rockefeller's on the phone. And I said, tell Bill Aquavello to stop calling up and teasing me, Bill Aquavello being my closest friend. Because they always said to me, hey, you haven't met Mr. Rockefeller yet? No. Anyway, she said, no, this guy doesn't sound like any of your friends. You better take the call. So I said, all right. Good morning, Mr. Rockefeller. Jamie, thank you so much for taking the call. And please call me Lawrence. Yes, Lawrence. Very much like you to come on the board. And I said, Mr. Rockefeller, I don't really have any money. It doesn't matter, he said. You see, for these institutions to work, he said, you have to have workers and donors. If you only have workers, it doesn't work. If you only have donors, it doesn't work. So you can come on board
and be a worker.
So I joined the board 45 years ago. That's why I got involved with Memorial Sloan Kettering, because at just that time, I was chairman of that junior committee, and he decided he wanted one young person to be on the board who had spent time at the institution.
Yeah.
So I'm very mindful of what, Bobby Lehman had suggested I get involved with something first class, and I never realized I would end up being a board member, which I now am, I think, the longest serving board.
It's incredible. I mean, and how lucky they are.
Don't you think?
To have you. I do.
I do too.
I do. I know all the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us. So then you you're at Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
You decide you want to, went to go work for a family office, or you were working in private equity?
I went to work for a family office after 5 years at Lehman, and we were able to make investments in various areas, one of them being spaghetti sauce, which we did very well with.
That's the Aunt Millie's.
Yeah.
By the way, brilliant on the all-natural.
Amazing.
You know.
How lucky was that?
You were ahead of the times.
It was.
You were like organic before organic was organic.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. No, I know.
When we took the ads out in the New York Times, we would underline all the bad stuff in other people's spaghetti sauce and none on ours. And which one would you rather serve your family? Sales went from $1 million to $20 million in about 4 years. It was,
amazing.
Yeah, it was really huge. And unfortunately, I sold it. I got this huge offer. To this day, I regret not keeping it because it was such a wonderful business. And years later, I was out in Singapore. I had been invited by a man called Phuc Phi, believe it or not. And he ran a company called Bousted. And Bousted was the second oldest business in Singapore. And it had been started by my great-great-great-grandfather.
Oh, stop it.
Well, I didn't ever heard of Edward Bousted.
Oh, this is on your mother's side?
No, this is on my father's side. Father's side. Never heard of him. Nothing, right? Anyway, I had decided that when I got the call from the chairman of this company, Mr. Phuc Phi, invited me to come out.
Did you think that was a prank call too?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I got the number and I called back, And anyway, as it turns out, he wanted me to come and speak at the 180th anniversary of the founding of Bousted. So I went. And
how cool is that?
It was cool.
Did he give you all the background on your
Oh, they sent me everything. They didn't know very much. They just sent me all the books that had been written. Anyway, so they had 850 people for dinner, including the first minister, and it was a big deal. This is second oldest company in Singapore. Anyway, I decided they wanted me to speak, so I didn't quite know what to talk about. So I talked about my father and whether Edward Bousted would have liked what my father did, and I thought Edward would have liked that. And then I talked about me. I said Edward would have liked some of the things I did, not all. But I did I did buy a spaghetti sauce company, and it was wonderful, and people started to laugh. And I said, and just for all of you that are in business, just remember one thing: the most expensive ingredient in a jar of spaghetti sauce is the jar. And all of a sudden, anyway, so spaghetti sauce, that was wonderful business.
Yeah, and then but while you were in that role, you also got involved in the energy business.
I did. We sold Aunt Millie's was sold in 1981, and I got involved with a company called Global Natural Resources, which was located in Houston. And ultimately, I became executive chairman of it. And we were the first American company to sign a joint venture agreement in Russia in 1989. And it was, kind of wonderful. We were pioneers in that sense, and it was a difficult time in Russia. I mean, Glasnost had taken over. The partners we had were Tatars. They were very honorable and decent. The oil field was gigantic in Tatarstan, which is about 600 miles east of Moscow before you get to the Ural Mountains. And it was an eye-opening experience of dealing with Russia at that time. And
how did that work though? Because the government didn't own the oil fields. It was, or was it just
fields then?
They did. That's what I thought. I would think. And then, were you there for the transition of that?
The government ended up owning the oil fields. I mean, the company that we were involved with was called Tatneft, and it had the concession in Tatarstan. I see. Okay. And they went public. Okay. Who controlled it after we left? I have no idea. But anyway, so that was interesting, and we sold the company eventually about 1994. So I'd been chairman for 5 years. Anyway, it got sold, and that's when I made the move to go and work at Sotheby's. But
so tell me about that. You're 50. I'm almost 50. It's a big,
I was 50. I was getting divorced. I've been married for almost 30 years. And I was without a job because the oil company had been sold. It's not a good moment. So
so tell me, what you're going out to lunch with friends, you're brainstorming. I
didn't know what to do. I was so befuddled by it all. And the divorce part was obviously just so painful, and it was so sad, and it was was all my fault. And I mean, I can tell the listeners here, I had a drinking problem, and it wasn't getting any better in 1994. And eventually we got divorced, and I was staying with some friends, and the male friend was a very famous art dealer. And he said, why don't you go interview at Christie's and Sotheby's? They could use you.
Yeah.
And so I tootled on down and interviewed at both places, and they both offered me a job. And I went to work for Sotheby's because I knew Alfred Taubman, who was the chairman, and I knew Dee Dee Brooks, who was the chief executive officer, and I went to work there. And that sort of was wonderful, and I eventually became chairman of the Americas for Sotheby's, and I started becoming an auctioneer, which I really liked.
Yeah, tell me about that. So
I fancied myself as being an auctioneer. Of course, I was told, forget it, you'll never have a chance, because the people here are younger than you and they've been doing it for 20 years. You have no chance to be an auctioneer. We have too many people that want to be. I didn't take that as a no. But you see, I grew up in Hollywood, and let me tell you something. If you want to be on Broadway, you've got to go to the Borscht Belt, right?
Yep.
So I went to the Borscht Belt. I went and did charity auctions all over America for Sotheby's. When no one wanted to do them, I'd go. And I wasn't very good, and I got things thrown at me. And
well, by the way, you're also dealing with a tough audience, I feel like, charity auctions. Because people are, we didn't have phones back then. People are staring at their phones, but they're looking down. They're excusing themselves to go to the bathroom. Nobody, and...
Yeah. It was very, very difficult, but it was the only way I was going to get a chance. I knew that. If I could deal with charity auctions, I could deal with regular auctions. Regular auctions are a piece of cake compared to a charity auction. Charity auctions is really hard because people are not coming there because they want to buy anything.
Yeah.
That's for starters. And they talk to each other. That's another thing, something else. And if they drink too much, they talk to each other a lot.
Yeah.
They don't talk to you. Yeah. So it's very hard. But anyway, I persevered, and that led me to do other auctions. And
were you thinking, though, was it just something that you'd always been interested in doing, or was it a challenge when they said you're not going to be good at it? And then you thought,
I thought I could do it.
Yeah,
I thought I could do it. I think the actor gene came in.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I remember I had to make a big decision. I went down to do a gay men's health crisis auction in Philadelphia, where it was 600 gay men, and I was to sell some local artwork that was done by local artists in Philadelphia and to get these guys to buy these things.
Yeah.
And it was not going well. And the young men bringing out the auction, the paintings were all really cute and had tight blue jeans. And you can imagine, just like the fights in Vegas, same idea. And about halfway through it, a guy stood up, and he was an enormous guy. He said, "Hey, Mr. Auctioneer, you're the cutest little auctioneer I've ever seen." I'm looking at him. Dead silence. And he says, "You know what I like to do? I like to come up to that stage. I like to kiss you." Am I allowed to tell this story?
Yeah.
I like to kiss you. And then I like to turn you around, take your pants off, and fuck you. And
so
now this is a moment in time. You're gonna deal with this, or you're never gonna deal with it. You're never gonna do this again. It's up to you. This is your moment. You gotta make a decision here. I said, "All right, you can come up and kiss me."
I was gonna say you leaned in.
I said, "You can come up and kiss me, but no fucking." And of course, everybody laughed. And he sat down, and the painting sold like wildfire. And then I'm leaving at the end of this now successful evening. I'm leaving, and he's standing there, and he gives me a big hug, and he says, "You were the straightest guy we've seen in years. They sent you, a straight guy, to this audience. That was funny for all of us. And the fact of the matter is, we knew you were straight, and it was just extraordinary that you came back so fast with that line." And I didn't want to tell him that I came from a Hollywood gene pool. I had my old man was streaked on national television years ago. Anyway,
he was streaked, and he was also a king of the one-liner and the.
Anyway, so as a result, I ended up doing about 750 charity auctions, and I raised a whole lot of money for charities around America.
You've raised, I would probably guesstimate, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, 750 plus of the 750 auctions. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think is? I have my own opinion about the secret to your success, but tell me what do you think it is?
I don't know. I had this attitude that I developed that I would always talk to the audience first. I wouldn't come out there and try and say lot number one, trip to Rome.
Yep.
I wouldn't do that. I'd come out and talk. And I learned this at Robin Hood. Robin Hood being in New York, the sort of number one fundraiser event every year. and they'll raise $100 million plus in a given evening.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. And I did the auctions for Robinhood 20 times out of 30. Did a lot. And you're facing 4,500 people, masters of the universe, and they've seen all kinds of entertainment. They've had all kinds of videos shown. They've had all kinds of great people speak. And now you're up, and you got to do something. You've got to be able to raise money from this group of people. It's on your shoulders. And I would talk about what Robinhood meant to me, how it helped fight poverty in the 5 boroughs, and some of the things they did for schools. And I would try and get the attention of that audience, not ram it down their throat, but get the attention and get them to realize how serious it is, how important they can make a difference and change what's going on in people's lives that are less fortunate of them. And I would do that. And then I would go and do the paddle raise or whatever the auction I was doing. And I took that, because it worked at Robinhood, that I would then do that every time I took an auction. Yeah. And I did, until I stopped doing them about a year ago.
You stopped doing them about a year ago?
Well, I can't see as well as I used to. So I can't read down and look deep and all that stuff. And also, I decided that people had enough of me, and I think it was time.
I don't agree with that by a long shot.
I mean, I'll do it for the girls. I mean, I have to do it for Eugenie and for Rhonda, and I do it for the Jamie Niven Cup and Casa de Campo.
That's an abuse.
I don't do them anymore. You see, once you quit, you can't cherry pick. You're out. You're in or you're out. Yeah. You can't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Jones, I won't do yours, but I'll do yours." Yeah. That doesn't work. Can't do it.
Well, I think just the way, as you said, you're able to, connect with the audience and really
maybe
you do. Your humor, and by the way, in many cases, half the people that are sitting in the audience, which
or
is
not.
Or not.
Doesn't really matter to me, actually.
It doesn't, but you have a connect. Just by who you are and how personable you are and warm you are and funny you are, people want to give you money.
Well, I care about the institution that I'm representing, and as I told you, I feel like when I stand up there, I represent that institution that night, and it's important that I'm part of them. I mean, look, it's so many different things you throw into the hopper, but I just found myself doing it and feeling good about it, and I always try to think, when I left that room, did I leave any money in the room? Yeah. And if I didn't leave any money in the room, I felt good. And if I did leave money in the room, which happened a lot, I felt terrible. But I kept trying. And I tried so many different times with so many different organizations. But look, in the end, you can do it for so long. And I think you have to step back and get on with something.
But what a legacy, truly. Because, any of us who've been, at charity events where, with all due respect to other people who do auctions, there is no one who's better than you. There really isn't.
Oh, thank you.
So what an impact. But tell me, what one of the interviews that I saw, you were talking about one of the lots was a Navy SEAL training. Any other craziest lot or craziest that's auction moment?
That was there's a wonderful organization called the Navy SEAL Foundation, and it raises money uniquely to support families of SEALs that have been killed in action or in training. And I emphasize they do lose people in training. And every year, a certain number of men are killed, and it's sometimes it's 10 and sometimes it's 20. And there's a major event, 2,000 people come, and what you're asked to sell, what I was asked to sell, was the opportunity to participate in a training program, either air, land, or sea, each being a separate issue. And if you win, you would go out to Coronado, California, and then you would be trained by, I think, ex-SEALs, although I couldn't say that, on jumping out of a helicopter or jumping out of with a parachute or swimming underwater or riding in a Range Rover or whatever it was that you emulated for 4 or 5 days what it would like to be a SEAL. And you would sell these things for a great deal of money. And you had to be very, very careful how you purported yourself in these things because, number one, it is a night remembering people that have been killed. Yeah. You have women there with corsages, either the mother, the daughter, or not the daughter, but the mother or the wife or the girlfriend or the sister. So they're all there, and you have to be careful what you say. And the admiral who's in charge is one of these guys who doesn't fuck around. And I always sit next to him, and I was watching him as I was selling the first lot, which is the air part. And it was purchased by a woman who was wearing a short red skirt. I'll never forget it. And she was sort of bidding in the back of the room, and I sold it to her. And I decided I would just add a little bit of humor to this. And I said, the great thing is that the young lady that just purchased this, wearing a very short red skirt, I might add, had told me if she won, she was going to jump out of the helicopter feet first. And, of course, all the men laughed and they went, whoa, whoa, and make that noise.
The
and the admiral's looking at me and went, steady. Steady, Jamie.
That is.
Okay. That was always the most amazing night. I mean, it really
So did they offer that lot every year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they gave me a Navy SEAL paddle, which I cherish.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I really cared about doing it for those men and made a difference. And I hope I made a difference. Lord knows I worked that room. There were people there with money. There was a lot of Navy people, but there were people from Wall Street there, and you knew where they were, and you pointed at them, and you did okay.
And those kinds of those are experiences that people can't have access to on their own.
No,
so the fact that they were offering that, and I'm sure it was.
I mean, it was always a very emotional night. I think of it more than all the others, other than Robin Hood. How emotional it was to work on that kind of fundraising and whatever. The last time I did it, General Mathis was being honored, and he was going to speak, and he was a Marine general, obviously, and he was in charge of all the armed forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. And General Mathis was not a guy you fool around with him, and he was a pretty serious chap. And my lady friend and I, Beatrice, went to the wrong hotel where this evening was to take place, because it was always at the Hilton, and they changed it to Crown Plaza.
Yeah.
And so we got there a little bit late, and they were going in for dinner, and so we took our overcoats and shoved them underneath the table, and I was seated next to General Mathis. And he said to me, he said, how nice to meet you. He said, weren't you supposed to be here earlier? And I said, yes, I was, but made a boo-boo on the hotel. I was mumbling at him,
Did he say it like a real Marine general?
He said, no, but really what happened? And I said, well, General, I went to the wrong hotel. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, I did my shtick, and he followed, and he was very funny about me, and he said, it's nice to see Jamie here. I'm glad he got here. And anyway, time to leave, and I'm getting our coats, and he says to me, Jamie, do you want me to send a couple of SEALs to make sure you get home?
Oh, my God.
This is the first and only time I met General Mathis. But
that's incredible, though. That's incredible. I mean, I think to be able to have that kind of impact for that kind of an important cause.
It mattered.
And
that's what it is. You see, a lot of people don't understand that, but it did matter.
Yeah.
It mattered that you could do it, and it mattered that you could be helpful, and it mattered that you felt you were part of that organization that night, so that you came across not as some dickhead auctioneer, but you came across as someone who was really part of the deal.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I don't know. I mean, time will tell. I mean, it just depends.
Tell me, so you had all those experiences with the charity initially when you were trying to get, and then you go back to your day job. This is the auctioneering charity stuff was your side hustle, right? You were doing that. I mean, not for money, but you were
never
doing
for
that
money. Unlike other people, no, I never got paid.
But for you were doing that, and you were getting that exposure, and then you go back to Sotheby's, and how did you parlay that into doing auctions for them?
Well, I learned to be an auctioneer by virtue of taking those charity auctions, and so I ended up doing a lot of auctions at Sotheby's. I never did the two big night sales, because that was done by a person who had been there and was very, very good at what he did. I've been doing it for 20 years before I got there.
Okay.
But I did a lot of single owner sales. I mean, I did so many, but one of them I remember most is the estate of Johnny Cash.
Amazing.
And I really loved that. And his daughter was there, and we talked, and I sold the handwritten note of I Walk the Line. So when he composed the lyrics for I Walk the Line, he wrote it on a piece of white paper, and I sold that piece of white paper for God knows how much money. And what surprised me was the people who came probably never would come back, but they came to buy a piece of Johnny Cash. It was important to them. And so I took my time selling it. And we sold everything. Every piece of furniture, every piece of silver, all the gold records, the platinum records, whatever it was, we sold. And I was so happy at the end of it, and she was so nice.
His daughter was so nice.
And I wish I would see her again and give her a hug, because it was really, really emotional, you know.
We were down in Nashville a couple weeks ago and went to the Johnny Cash Museum.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know a little bit about Johnny Cash from, you know, the movie Walk the Line, right? And I know some of his hits. My husband has in like his gym, I did this for Father's Day, he's got a poster of Johnny Cash giving the finger when he's at, I think it's San Quentin or whenever he's doing the concert. Folsom Prison, that's exact. And I couldn't get over how packed, this is like on a Tuesday in Nashville, this museum was, and what a huge following he has.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Full of people I never saw my whole life. I mean, I like doing those. I did a bunch of those single owner sales, they're called. Yeah. And I guess of all of them, Johnny Cash was one. We did a baseball memorabilia auction, which was about 16 different sales. So many baseballs and mitts and God knows what else. And the hero of the collection and of baseball in New York City was Mickey Mantle. It wasn't Babe Ruth, it wasn't Ty Cobb, it wasn't any of those people. It wasn't Joe DiMaggio, it was the Mick. Yeah. And the people that showed up for this auction were extraordinary. They were usually fat, sort of 50-year-old white men with silly jerseys that had 69 on them and stuff like that, you know. Anyway, I took 3 of the 16 sessions, and one of the sessions I took involved selling his mitt, and it was an MM4, which I had as a kid when I lived in California. I had a Mickey Mantle MM4.
Oh, stop it. So this was his
mitt.
MM4, okay.
And I got to sell it, and it was extraordinary because we started the auction at $5,000, and within 2 seconds it got to $250,000. These guys were very unsophisticated bidders. They took it from $500 or $5,000 to $50,000 to $100,000.
That was 69 with the 69 group. Were they bidding?
Oh yeah, they were all collectors of baseball memorabilia and the Mick.
Okay,
let's hear it for the Mick. They must have said 3,000 times. It's a very unruly audience.
Yeah.
Anyway, sell this goddamn.
I love that though. That's
sell the Mick. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I looked down at my colleague who'd been bidding on the phone, and I said the paddle number, because you have to ask the paddle number. So you write it down. And he goes like this. He puts his arms out like, I don't know the paddle number. Now, you can't do that. I mean, you have to have a paddle number if you're bidding. And he's looking at me like, doesn't know what to do.
Because 69 didn't register, or the guy on the phone didn't have a paddle?
My guy did not have a paddle. And he's looking at me with his arms open like this. And with that, one of the windows of the skyboxes opens up. It's Billy Crystal, and he's got the paddle.
Stop it.
And he yells out, Mr. Auctioneer, this any good? And I said, sold a paddle of $684. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
The place went crazy. I had to say, we'll take a 5-minute break here. We'll take a 5-minute break. I couldn't control the crowd. They just went bananas.
That is awesome.
Oh, my God. It was such a great moment. And I remember that it's just interesting that in the very, very beginning, I would try and take these sales, and, you know, they'd give you the worst sale. And there was a sale.
When you were starting out, yeah.
There was a sale of the estate of Leonard Bernstein.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure as hell I'm the only one there who knew Leonard Bernstein, okay? Yeah. Knew being defined. I went to his apartment a few times with, you know, rather left-wing crazy people, you know, that kind of thing. But anyway, so the last session of the day, people came, they wanted a piece of Leonard Bernstein. So they wanted his jacket he wore in Tanglewood. He wanted the baton he used in Tanglewood. And he wanted the platinum record for West Side Story or whatever it was. I was selling all that stuff. And a woman got so carried away that she put her hand in the air and the paddle flew out of her hand and went about 5 rows in front. This is my early days, right? Yeah. So I said, ladies and gentlemen, just hold on 1 second. I went down, I picked the paddle up, I took it and gave it to her. I said, now, madam, take your time. Don't worry. I'll look at you until this is over. And I just thought, you know, I can do this. Yeah. I can do this. And it was The Estate of Leonard Bernstein. And now I'm going to go and see that movie. I haven't seen it
I was going to say Maestro. Yeah.
Can't wait.
It's supposed to be good. I mean, Bradley Cooper's supposed to be good.
I'm here. It's just fantastic.
That's interesting that was not I would think that would have been a huge auction. You were saying that
weren't that many valuable pieces. It wasn't like there were big paintings or anything. This is all.
Oh, so it wasn't about the person. It was about what was up for auction. That was
the furniture, the glasses, or jacket, or the baton. Or, whatever, or music sheets that he wrote, or he wrote a beautiful. I don't think maybe it was an opera called Candide. And, people bid for that sort of stuff. It's collectibles.
Yeah. So you're doing auctions at Sotheby's. You go from vice chairman or working at Sotheby's vice chairman to chairman.
Yeah.
And you are involved with Sloan Kettering. You're involved with the MoMA. And today you're very involved with the Partnership to End Addiction.
Correct.
Sorry, tell us about that.
All right. So today I sit on the board of Memorial, which is 45 years, of MoMA, which is 35 years. I sit on Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is, I've been on the board there for 5 years, which is a pretty extraordinary not-for-profit organization.
How does so does the board get to decide how the money is allocated?
Well, they make a presentation. I mean, it's a huge staff.
Their staff, and then you all vote on whatever
we vote on the whole deal.
Is their annual budget public? A public?
Yes, I think
it has to be, right? It's got Form 990 as a not-for-profit.
Exactly, yeah.
So how much money a year does that? I would think it
2.5 to 3.
Yeah.
More than any other institution in America except for the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation.
Wow, that's incredible.
And
do they have any? Is their mission targeted towards one?
Yes, 5 things.
Okay. What are their 5 things?
I'm chewing a mint. In case it sounds loud. Education.
Okay.
The arts, world health, government innovation, and the environment.
Okay.
That's it.
And world health, is there any particular, is it?
Totally.
Vaccines?
It has to do with everything. It has to do with not smoking.
Okay.
Big not smoking. Big efforts to curb emissions from coal-burning power plants. Vaccination programs around the world. It's all over the place, but there's really talented people that run these 5 definitive different groups. And then Michael has his own desire to help Johns Hopkins in a meaningful way.
I was going to ask if part of that big, he made a transformative gift to Johns Hopkins.
Yes, and continues.
And continues to, But the big one that was announced, was that through the foundation?
Everything Michael gives away goes through the foundation.
Yeah.
So if he decides to give a grant of $1 billion, let's say, to Johns Hopkins, it comes through the foundation.
And then so you're very involved with that, which is, by the way, fascinating and such important work.
To me, that is unbelievably interesting. And the board is 20, of which 2 are his daughters. And it's a joy to be involved with them and to listen to what they're all saying and what they're positioning themselves. They have interesting speakers that come and talk to us. I mean, it's quite amazing. But
you're probably also getting access to or learning about some of the greatest not-for-profit organizations, I would think, on the globe, right? Important work that's happening.
Right, where they partner with them.
Right.
To save the coral reefs or ocean, save the oceans is a big part of our thing. But charter schools is a huge part, a huge component. I mean, we pledged $750 million the other day for supporting charter schools in the United States.
So
So the Partnership to End Addiction is the one that I spend a lot of time on. I'm chairman of it. I spend really a lot of time. I talk to the fellow who runs it. It was called Creighton Dury. I talk to him every day. I help change the board in terms of bringing on new people. I help with the fundraising in a big way. I generally really am involved in a meaningful way. And I got involved because I was having lunch with the founder, a man called Joe Califano, who had led the charge in America to stop people smoking. And also he led the charge to how to bring up a drug-free kid. And he had spent a lot of his time and effort writing books about this very issue. And after he got to a certain age, he decided that he was going to step back. And I was having lunch with him just to listen to what he was doing.
Right.
And I asked him if he had anyone on the board that went to meetings. And he said, everyone on the board goes to the meetings. I said, no, Joe, goes to meetings.
Right. Like themselves in recovery.
Like AA. And he said, oh, I don't think so. I don't think I know anyone that goes to AA meetings. I said, you do, actually. And he said, who's that? I said, it's me. And so he invited me to go on the board, and I did. And ultimately, I became chairman of it. And
how long have you been involved with?
I've been involved with them for about 10 years, but I've been chairman for about 4.
And is the focus of the organization, is it education-based? Is it supporting? The
Partnership to End Addiction is a combination of a joint venture that was called the Center on Alcohol and Substance Abuse, which was Joe Califano's, and an organization called Partnership for Drug-Free Kids, which is a guy called Jim Burke. Jim Burke had run Johnson & Johnson. And we merged the two entities together about 3 years ago. And so our focus is to help families deal with addiction. A lot of that today is the opioid addiction issue. The numbers are fairly scary. 100,000 people will die of opioid overdose this year. At least 100,000 will die of alcohol overdose. And somewhere on the vicinity
that is fascinating.
40 million Americans have some form of addiction or another. And what we try and do through 3 different ways is to help families deal with this issue. Issue is defined as mother finds drug paraphernalia in a kid's drawer. Research, which we've been doing now for 30 years, shows that if you can stop a kid taking drugs, and as teenagers, the odds of them becoming drug addicts when they get older is very small. If you don't, the odds of them becoming drug addicts is very high. So you have to attack this thing as families and help families have the tools to deal with this. So we do it in 3 ways. 1, we have a website which about 2 million people came on last year.
Wow.
And we give them the tools to what they have to do to help themselves and their family. They're often, I think, families that don't have enough money probably to pay for rehab, as an example.
Which, by the way, is a big problem. I know I was talking about our community, and I'm an elected official, and they one of the things that people do is it is very scary. They would rather have their kid get arrested sometimes so that they actually can get care by then going into the system, which is really unfair. I mean, it's really but a lot of this is going to change, I hope. Okay, so the next thing is how we handle. We have been approached by municipalities and states about giving them advice how to take the opioid settlement dollars that are coming to them and use them to help the families that are in their communities. And we're going to be doing a lot of that work, and we do it now. And the third thing is we had 22,000 families last year that we spoke directly to on the phone, helping them navigate the process of getting their kids into any form of therapy they can. We usually, not always, but of the 500 people that work with us in that area, many of them are mothers that have lost a kid or 2. Yeah.
And they're the ones that deal with these families and talk them through the process. And, we know that in Des Moines, there's a very good rehab. Over here, there's AA meetings are in the Baptist church over there. I mean, we do everything we can to help those families. And that's what we do as the Partnership to End Addiction. That's our focus. Families, direct, indirect, and the states. That's where we are today. That's what we fundamentally deal with.
That is so important, because when you are overwhelmed by the prospect of trying to help your family member or friend heal and seek recovery, and I've been in the periphery of that process before, you don't know what the first step is, or what's the best program, or what's nearby. So having those resources available is really critical to getting those people help, and having the moms who have lost children, it must be very cathartic for them, I would think, in being able to help others.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I think that what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to double the size of the endowment so we can have more money to do more of these things. I'm slowly but surely adding more people to the board. In many cases, people who've got skin in the game by virtue they've had a tragedy in their life, usually over drugs. And So that's my goal the next 3 years, to stay on this and do everything I can to achieve what I hope will be a great help to people out there. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, I go to AA meetings. I haven't had a drink in 13 and a half years, but I drank for 50 years. I regret it terribly, but there's nothing you can do about it. One thing you do learn in this, you have to learn a lot of humility. It's really hard the first time you go to an AA meeting, I can tell you, really hard. And
is it because of just having to the sharing part, or the
whole deal? The fact that you're desperate, the fact that you're so unhappy with yourself, the fact that you're embarrassed, the fact that you're so humiliating. You don't realize how important it is when you sit down. All those people have been through this.
Yeah.
And they're there to help you. I mean, once you learn that, you realize what an extraordinary organization AA is. And you find them all over the world. I mean, I've been to a meeting in Buenos Aires. I have been in Paris, when I go quite a lot. This English church, I go there. And
I am always so impressed by the availability of and you're going to know the name of it, but I've seen it on schedules at school reunions. It'll say meeting with there's a code. It's like meeting with John Doe. That's not the name, but there's and that is a code that there is an AA meeting available.
Friend of Bill?
Friend of Bill,
there
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friend of Bill.
Yeah.
Well, Friend of Bill is important. The first time someone asks you if you're a friend of Bill, you look at him and say, I didn't like Bill Clinton that much.
Yeah.
I was in a restaurant down which I loved, down at the end of Lexington Avenue. It was a great Danny Meyer restaurant. Maialino it was called, Maialino. And I sit down, and this is early on. I've been to 3 AA meetings in my life, and I'm struggling like crazy. And so I ordered a virgin Mai Tai.
Yeah.
And the girl brings me a virgin Mai Tai, and I hoover it in about 2 seconds, right? And I said, before she could leave the table that had it, I said, would you bring me another one, please? She comes back, and she puts it down. She says, are you a friend of Bill?
Yeah.
I said, no, I didn't like Bill Clinton. She says, I'm not talking about Bill Clinton. I'm talking about Bill. I'm looking at her like, what the fuck is she talking about? She says, AA. Oh, yeah, sure, Bill. Oh, yes. I'm a friend of Bill. Thank you very much. Aren't you a little young? She said, I'm young, but I go there.
That's so what, for people that are listening that themselves, and I think, people are sort of struggling themselves with alcohol or substance abuse and wondering, whether or not they should seek help, or sort of are experiencing some of the things you talked about, being embarrassed by it, trying to sort through it. What kind of advice would you give them?
The greatest advice I ever got about this whole issue was when I decided I needed to make a change. I needed to do something about this horrible situation I found myself in. I called up a friend of mine who I know had dealt with this when he was younger. Let's call him Jimmy. He is called Jimmy. And I called him up, and he lived near me, and I said, I need to talk to you. And he came over in about 2 minutes. And he walked in, and we sat down outside. We played a lot of golf together. And he said, partner, why do I feel that today we're not talking about golf?
Yeah.
I explained to him. He said, good. He said, well, let me help you. This is what you got to do. You got to don't have another drink and go to meetings. That's what you got to do. And for the next 90 days, I'll call you, or I'll text you, or I'll email you. Just check in and see how you're doing. But you got to go. Try and go every day if you can. But at least go once every other day.
Did he go with you, or did you have someone, you went by yourself?
I happened to have been by myself, I did go with several people later on, particularly in sort of phase 2, like after the first 5 weeks. I went with a guy a couple of times. That was very helpful. He said the next thing is that when you get up in the morning and you're shaving, there's going to be a guy standing behind you. He's better looking than you. He's better dressed than you. He's smarter than you. And he wants you back. He's called Mr. Alcohol. And what you're going to say to Mr. Alcohol is not today. Don't say about tomorrow. Just say not today, Mr. Alcohol. That's one thing. He said the second thing is that when you go out at night, you're a 10. No question about it. You're funny. Everyone loves you. My wife loves you, which really pisses me off. You're a nightmare. And when you go home that night, you think you're still a 10, but you're not. You're a 1. And when you get to zero, it's going to be hard to help you. That's what you got to deal with. So there you are, partner. Call you.
Yeah. And not only have you not looked back, but you've taken this
I've helped other people.
You've had and
I've helped other people go, but I've never imposed myself on people because I don't think that's the way you do it, and that doesn't ever work. People have to come to you and say, what do I do? Then you can help them. You can take them with you to a meeting. They don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
You sit there.
Yeah.
So remember that you're not a 10, you're a 1. And remember that it's only about today, it's not about tomorrow. And go to meetings and listen to all these people talk about what they've been through. I mean, some of these people have been sober for 40 years in these meetings. Some relapsed and have just come back yesterday. Doesn't matter, as long as you're all there. And if you're ever worried about finding a meeting, let me tell you something. In New York City, there must be a million of them.
There's a lot of friends of Bill.
You go online and you can get by the hour. If I could find one in Buenos Aires, and I could find one in Paris, I can assure you.
How is the language barrier on that?
It's in English.
Oh, it is.
The one in Buenos Aires, you can go anywhere you want in the world where you don't speak the language, and you sit there in an AA meeting. It's fine because you know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
you're just part of the deal.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's basically I would think
you're better off if it is.
Yeah, having that touchstone, right, and being with others and understanding you're taking time out to pause and recognize.
I went to I found one in Buenos Aires, and I used to stay in this wonderful hotel called the Alvear Palace, which I recommend highly. It's one of those great hotels where the employees dress a lot better than the guests. Anyway, I used to always give $100 to the concierge when I went there, and in case I needed him, and I never needed him. And so one day I decided I need to go to a meeting. So I went downstairs to meet Juan, and the other concierge was dealing with a family of Americans that were dressed in a most horrible way. I mean, you've never seen such ugly things. And I won't even tell you what the slogans on the sweater was, but one of the girls had an arrow pointing down and said, slippery when wet. Stop it, right? So I now look at Juan. I said, Juan, I need you to find me an AA meeting. AA meeting? I said, yeah. He said, how do you know we have AA meetings here? I said, it's really simple. You're 28 million strong. You drink enormous amounts of Malbec and God knows how much brandy. You're going to have so many meetings, not even funny. And I tell you what you do. Get on the phone and you'll find that in español, por favor. And he says, I can speak Spanish.
Amigo de Bill. I mean,
call me. And I look at all these people all looking at me like I'm garbage, I'm going to go to I'm AA kind of thing. And the girl with the funny looking sign, I said, you particularly have a good day, I said. I go to my room and the phone rings right away. And he says, I found 8.
Wow.
He said, as you can appreciate, Senor Niven, these things start around 11 o'clock at night because, we don't eat dinner until 12. And so he found me one that was in English in a church, which they often are in churches or downstairs usually. And there were 40 people there where English was our common language.
Wow.
And it was riveting. I mean, it is all over the place. I mean, and that's the thing. There's a world out there that can help you.
Yeah. You
just have to get yourself into that meeting. You have to walk in that door. People will ask you, this is the first time you've been there. They'll give you books you can read about it, and they'll volunteer to be your sponsor. I mean, it's a really good.
It's a community.
It's an amazing
global community. Yeah.
And what does it cost you? It costs you $2. You don't have to put anything in the pot, but they ask for $2.
So, pivoting a bit.
Yes, pivot.
You were on The Apprentice. I don't want to spend, too much time talking about the Donald, but I did want to ask about how that experience was. How did that go down?
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things. I mean, this is now when The Apprentice is being shot for the first season. Okay, so it hadn't reached television yet. So the concept was that they have those 2 teams, what they had in those days, and the teams will go out and get things that could be sold at auction for charity. And that whatever team won would not lose a member of the team, and the team that lost, one of them would get fired. That's how the system was. Okay, so someone suggested, because I was now the head man for charity auctions, Sotheby's, right? Would I do it? And I said I didn't want to do it. I didn't like the idea of it. It didn't sit well with me because, first of all, you got to have people in the audience that are going to buy these things. And if you don't pack it with enough people who can afford it, it doesn't really work. And I'm a little worried that this thing is not going to be that great. And whether Sotheby should be involved with it or not, I don't know. But anyway, they prevailed upon me, and they, in the end, they asked me. So I said, okay. So I went to visit both groups. And the first group I went into, they were all these tough people. And I said, hi, I'm your auctioneer tonight. I hope to do you proud, and thank you so much for working so hard at getting these things to sell. And a guy was lying on the floor, looking at me, his back against the wall. And he said, so how much do you think this thing will go for? And he mentioned whatever it was. I said $5,000. And he said, it went for $250,000 at Robinhood 2 nights ago. I said, I'm well aware of that. It did go for $250,000, but that's at Robinhood, not here.
Yeah. Did he explain why he was on the floor with his back up against the wall?
He was being an asshole. Anyway, so he looked at me and he said, anyway, how would you know? I said, look, I just talked to the guy that did the auction. And he told me 5,000 is probably the right number. Forget the 250,000. He said, when did you talk to the guy? I said, just right now.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me, and I said, you're not getting it, are you? All right,
You're
I
the
said,
guy, yeah.
I'm telling you, this is not going to be big dollars. This is not a big dollar deal tonight. So let's just make sure we're all happy. And I go and meet the next group. The next group was rather nicer. They said, well, thank you so much for doing this. And anyway.
Now, is the Donald, are you
he's sitting in the audience.
He's in the audience. He's not, it's not like the boardroom. I didn't watch it that much.
What he is doing is he's sitting there, and then they just go somewhere and shoot the fact that he fires one of them.
Okay.
Whether it was in one of our conference rooms or not, I don't remember. All I did was the auction. He did ask me if I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever done in my life, being on his show, and I confided in him that it wasn't. But that was The Apprentice. And I know that the next morning after the thing was aired, Imus in the morning said, I watched The Apprentice last night. The only guy that was any goddamn good was that auctioneer. Imus in the morning.
I mean,
yeah. Anyway, so that was the Donald effort on my part.
He, that was quite something. And then you also, did stand up at Caroline's.
Mm-hmm, I did.
Was that like a one night only? I don't know why I didn't know. Your daughters did not tell me about this. I would have joined them. I didn't tell them. Okay. Oh, okay.
I went there. The Caroline herself. Okay, I got to know her a little bit, and she was laughing at me about something. And the next thing I know, I get a call from a guy who held himself out as the funniest CEO in America. And this is a guy that liked to get groups together to do stand-up comedy at Caroline's, particularly Thursday night, where you have 3 amateurs and you have 3 pros. Okay, and that's the concept. And so I thought it was a terrible idea, and then I changed my mind and decided I'd do it. So I pitch up early at Caroline's. It's a long bar, right? And I'm standing there, not thinking about too much, and a rather elderly lady comes in, and she orders a, what are those pink drinks?
Cosmo?
Cosmo. She orders a Cosmo, and she has the Cosmo in front of me, and I'm looking at her, and I said, you come here often? She said, I always come on Thursday nights. I said, why is that? She says, well, it's first come, first served, and I'm here early, and I get a nice seat, and I order dinner, and then I watch the amateurs make fools of themselves. Yeah. I said, I'll have a glass of white wine, please. So I had a glass of white wine, and she disappears into the bowels of this thing. It was really scary because you're in a void. It's the one person that...
Didn't you have some plants? You didn't have any plants?
Wait,
you didn't tell any friends?
No, but you have... The problem is the lights are all in your face, and you can't see anything. You can't see anyone in the audience. You're talking onto a black pit. It's not like a regular auction where the lights are on all the people, you can see them. You don't have to be seen doing an auction.
So the only feedback you're getting then is whatever you're hearing. Yeah.
Sound. It's a little scary. Anyway, so I looked down.
So what'd you think?
Well, I went down to the other end of the bar. There were 2 ladies there who were really attractive, sort of in their early 40s, with 16-year-olds, kind of natty kids.
Yeah.
And I said, hi, everybody, hi. And I said, you come here often. What we do, we come on Thursday night because that's the night our husbands play poker. I thought, And we're all here, and we're looking forward to tonight. I said, great. And one of the little bratty girls says, yeah. And tonight, there's a guy who's here whose father was a famous movie star, and he's going to be an amateur, and we're going to boo him. I'll have another glass of white wine, please, I said. So I had another glass of white wine. And I said, well, what would make you not boo this man?
Yeah.
If I happen to know him. And well, when he comes out on the stage, we always sit to the left, and you'll say, hi, girls, and we'll all say, hi, Jamie. I said, well, that sounds like a very good plan. Let me see if I can't get that worked out. Great. And with that, one of the mothers puts her phone number in my jacket. Seriously.
Stop it.
I'm thinking, this is going to be the greatest night of my life. Anyway, so eventually, it's 6 of us, and I'm number 5, which actually is good, because the amateurs were terrible.
So you're like the, people had terrible appetizers, and you're the, the delicious.
People are eating, and I have a group from Sotheby's that are there, but I didn't ask the girls, because all of my stories were 4 letters. So I would be careful. Anyway, so I was 5th, and I came out, and on the heels of really bad stuff. Yeah. People were booed and all that kind of stuff. And so I made fun of some of the jokes they made, and I said, hi, everybody. Hi, girls. Hi, Jamie. And all shouted. And so,
this is like the slippery than wet types.
Best crowd in the whole world. Anyway, so I tell them stories. I don't tell them jokes. And, it was interesting because some of the jokes were stolen from Noel Coward, and some of the jokes were stolen. I mean, it was just doing the best you could, knowing that this was really difficult, and you wish to hell you hadn't done it, okay? Anyway, it went okay. It didn't go great, but it went okay. And then I had to give a Donald story, which was the one I just told you about. Because I added stuff to it that I didn't want to repeat on the show. And then I went off stage, and I ran into the number 6, who was a real pro, who was just trying out his new stuff before he went to Vegas. And he looks at me and says, I bet you're happy about one thing, huh? I said, what's that? He said, you don't get to follow me. And I said, no. He said, you killed the others. Anyway, so I never did it again. I thought about doing it again. I thought it was really a kind of funny thing to have done. I met several people who've done it.
I got to, one of the things that I think is so inspirational about you is you've pursued so many different career paths. You've tried so many different things, and you've achieved so much, both professionally and personally. I mean, I love the fact that you're, willing to throw your hat in the ring to do Caroline's.
Yeah. I think that could be ego. That could be a lot of stuff. That could be, narcissism. It could be all kinds of stuff. No. On the other hand, it is brave.
Yeah.
And no, it was brave to do that, because that's hard.
Well, I think it's sort of like, kind of like on the no regrets sort of a thing. I've been reading a lot as I'm, turning 50 in a month, as you know, that when you get to a certain point in your life, you kind of think about, am I doing what I always wanted to be doing? I mean, look, here, I started a podcast, what are you pursuing, right? And what advice would you give to people? You had that switch, right, at 52, where you were, pivoting from working in finance and looking at your next step. I mean,
I think it depends so much on what you have done with your previous life. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, there's certain things you have to do to be a doctor. You really don't get to. You want to go through that process and decide you don't want to be a doctor, do something else. That's fine. But if you want to go down a road of being a lawyer, you want to go down your road of being a dentist or a doc or whatever it is, there's certain paths you have to take to get there. But there's a whole lot of stuff you can do out there in the world because you want to take a chance. And it's just a function of, can you afford it, I guess? Can you risk it? Do you ruin your career so badly to try something else that you've blown the career that you worked on? So it's guts ball. It's really hard. I think every situation is so individualistic that it would be hard to tell anyone what to do unless you heard each one mano a mano, honestly, because it's such a guts ball move to decide to do something totally different with your life. I mean, it'd be wonderful if I could be a singer. Unfortunately, I don't have a voice. I would have loved to have been Frank Sinatra. You bet I would have loved to have been Frank Sinatra, but no good.
I have thought about maybe a part 2 for me as some kind of lounge act, even if it's just a
what's a lounge act?
Like a singing, like a lounge singer. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like a
Can you sing?
No, but I like to perform. I can, but those people that do the things in Vegas, it's like that.
Yeah, okay.
Like a, sort of a.
I think that's gutty.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
But I think that's really gutty. But you're very funny, so you have an advantage over most people is you're really funny. And everyone that knows you says the same thing about you, that you're really funny. I know you're funny. And, to be able to take humor and give it out to people is a wonderful thing. Because you make people laugh, you change their life. It's so important to be able to laugh. And I don't know, I just think it would be, I'd love to come and listen to you.
I was going to say, maybe we could do like a Sonny and Cher or a.
Oh, right.
Yeah, who's
going to be Cher?
You do the comedy and I'll do
I want to meet her so badly.
Oh.
I do. I want to meet her for one reason, which is the craziest thing in the whole world. First of all, I was a big fan of her.
Yeah.
She's my age. Okay.
She looks great, by the way.
She's got blonde hair now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Trestle blonde hair.
Yeah.
So when you go on YouTube and you watch My Father Being Streaked, okay,
yeah.
Which was only seen by 500 million people, which is important.
Yeah.
You hear a laugh coming from the front row of the Academy. It's her. And she has a very distinctive, high-pitched laugh. And I want to meet her, and I want to ask her what she was thinking when she saw that happening in front of her.
We have to be able to make that happen.
And her laugh is so prevalent if you listen to it. And I just would... I know, and I'll be able to tell her the story that when I asked my father what he was thinking when it happened, because my father was sort of a very precise kind of guy, and I'm sure it really pissed him off was this guy did that, because this is his moment now to introduce Elizabeth Taylor, who's the biggest star in the world. They're going to give away Best Picture. It's the end of the evening. They're on deadlines. They got union issues, we got to finish, got to keep it going. And he's up there, and he's just warming up, and he's about to introduce Elizabeth. And the streaker comes. And I can tell you by looking at the way he looked.
Now, were you watching it live?
I was watching it on television.
Yeah.
And I said, uh-oh. That's the look that he would give your brother if he cheated on his report card. That kind of look, So he wasn't pleased. I knew that. But he ended up zapping the guy, and that pleased him, I'm sure. But I did ask him, I said, what were you thinking when he was running away from you? He said, I knew it wasn't Elizabeth's ass. I told Elizabeth Taylor that later on in life. She was not amused.
I mean, I'm sure.
But that was funny.
Poor Elizabeth did go have a bit of some. Her tush looked different, I think, at different times in her
probably, but
in her life.
Having said that, I thought she should have laughed at that because it was pretty funny.
I think it's very funny.
Yeah,
it's very funny.
Anyway.
So I had this question I was going to ask you about regret. What's your theory on regret? And I happened to be watching your dad on Dick Cavett, and he was asked the same question.
Was he?
And his response was he didn't have any regrets, except it's hard to think about what you regret except for the things that you haven't done.
Yeah. Well, it surprises me on that answer because. And then we'll go to the next question. Because when I got the call from him, he'd gone to the Mayo Clinic because he had been on an interview on the Parkinson show, and he had stammered on his words as if he was loaded. Now, I knew for sure he wasn't loaded. He would never go on television loaded. Not a chance. This is, forget it. No way. And so he took himself out to the Mayo Clinic, and they tested him, and he had Lou Gehrig's disease. He thought he'd had a stroke, and he called me up, and he said, I don't have a stroke, but I have something called motor neuron disease or called Lou Gehrig's disease. He said, do you know anything about it? Well, I did, actually. I said, that's terrible. He said, well, pick me up at the airport, and we'll go and have dinner. I picked him up at the airport, and we got in the car, and we were driving into town, and he said, this is going to be tougher on you than me. I've had a good life. The only regret I have is the fact that your mother died. Oh. And apart from that, everything has been great. He was right. It was harder on me, honestly. And he went very quickly, which was really good news because that's a disease that can linger, and it's horrible.
Horrible, yeah.
So the fact that he answered he didn't have regrets, that's a shame because he did.
Yeah.
So, me? Regrets?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, I clearly regret having been an alcoholic. I clearly regret that alcohol kind of ruined my life. I don't think for 1 second Fernando and I would have gotten divorced had it not been for my drinking. And I think that was sad for the girls, and it was sad for me, and it was sad for her. And I would say that the alcohol was kind of ruined my life in a way. I wasn't able to accomplish a lot of things I wish I had been able to accomplish. I had so many good opportunities, I went to a great college, I had great jobs. And it just got me, and I'm so glad it hasn't gotten me again, that I've had 13 years of being sober, and it makes a huge difference. And it makes a huge difference in my relationship with my grandson. It makes a huge difference in my relationship with my girls.
Yep.
So I thank God for that.
But if you hadn't had that experience, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in now, helping so many people.
Maybe not.
So I think
that's hard to say.
Yeah. No, because the only way you can really, I don't know. I mean, as you said to your friend that you were having lunch with who was stepping down, you said, do you have anybody on the board that, is a friend of Bill or who's gone to AA? Yeah. I mean, you understand the struggle that the people that you're serving are going through, which is really impactful.
Oh, I think you're right in that regard. Yes, I think it's helped that I've been able to do that, and I probably wouldn't have done it with the fervor that I do now. That I'm going to stick with this thing until I go out in the box. Yeah. Or I can't.
What's the line that we like from the producer Spiegel? It's I'm a pallbearer, not
always a pallbearer, never a corpse.
I'm going to use
that was Sam Goldwyn, age 90.
Oh, that was Sam Goldwyn who said that.
Yeah. How are you, Sam? I'm fine. Always a pallbearer, never a corpse.
It's so great. Well, I love seeing you. Thank you so much for coming. That brings us to the end of this episode of The Interview. A huge thank you again to Jamie Niven for joining us. And as always, thank you again for listening. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Instagram at The Interview with Leslie Heaney. A new podcast is released every Wednesday. And until then, this is Leslie, and don't forget to join The Interview.